This is Dr. David Allen coming to you on the television program, People Helping People. Codependency is a very major issue in our country, in fact, the world. It's where we desire to please people and do what they want. Many of us never seek our own dreams. Many of us never follow our own ambitions because we want to please somebody else. We want to do what somebody else wants us to do. The question is, what are the obstacles to breaking the codependency cycle? Tonight, with my daughter, Dr. Marie Ellen Carroll, we're discussing some of the obstacles people find in breaking that codependency cycle, where they have to always want to please people, they can't say no, they just can't do their own thing. They live in their self-made prison. Marie, what are the obstacles to breaking the codependency cycle?
Well, tonight I want to discuss some of the emotions that really get in our way. Just a quick recap from the episode we shot last month. We talked about how codependency comes from when we have been trying to help so much that we have ended up hurting ourselves. We talked about how that happens. A lot of times, maybe you were raised in a home where you had a parent that was codependent or addicted or ill, and so you were used to caregiving and taking care of someone, which is good. But when it comes to the point that you no longer live your own life, or you give up your own dreams, you give up your own adequacy to take care of someone else, then that becomes codependent. So we discussed how that occurs and how do you become aware that you're becoming codependent. One of the ways you become aware is just that constant feeling of anxiety, that maybe you are not living up to your full potential, a feeling that you are not having integrity, making decisions and choices that you know don't make sense. Your ability to handle unmanageability has increased or decreased. I described it as having several pots on a stove, and you're trying to keep lids on all of them, but all of them are boiling over. And you just get to that point where you say, my life has become unmanageable. I can no longer do this. I can no longer function in this way. And so what happens, even though you're aware of it, a lot of times we still stay in it. And it's very easy from the outside to judge someone else and say, why is that person staying in that situation? Whether it's codependent on a relationship or on a job or on a situation, why isn't that person breaking free? And so that's what we're talking about tonight. What are some of the things that keep us stuck in that place? You've reached the first step, which is breaking through the denial. You are now aware that your life has become unmanageable, that you are not living the life you had expected to lead, and that you are giving up your adequacy, you're giving up your sense of self because of someone or something else.
Well, you know, Marie, some people get pretty comfortable in pleasing people. They call it the prison of the familiar. They just been there in the past, they're there in the present, and they believe they'll be there in the future. And they're willing just to stay there and please and please and please and not do their own thing. What causes that?
Well, we are creatures of habit, and we become addicted to our lives, even if it's painful. If it's something we know, it feels a lot safer than something we don't know, which brings us to one of the key factors for staying in a situation like that, in your own created prison, is fear. We are so scared of what else is out there. And our perception of the worst thing that could happen is often way stronger than what would actually happen. So our fear of the unknown, our fear of not making it, what are people going to say, of feeling like a failure, keeps us stuck in this place. We now are aware that we're not in a good place, but we are so scared to try and do something else.
So in other words, the fear of moving out from what we're used to is so terrifying that we will stay there and almost become like a slave to what we're doing for the rest of our life.
Absolutely. Gandhi once said, the enemy is fear. It's not hate, it's fear.
Again?
The enemy is fear, not hate, but fear. Fear stops us from living our potential. Fear stops us from standing up for ourselves. We are so scared to get hurt again. As you've discussed several times in your show, the contemplative discovery pathway theory asserts that we all have been wounded in childhood, and we've either experienced humiliation, rejection, abandonment, and because of the scars and the pain from those hurts, we've created this false self. And the idea of getting hurt again, either humiliated or abandoned or rejected, is so terrifying. We don't want to risk it. So we keep taking the abuse, we keep taking the situation, prison of familiar, even if it's causing us to slowly die inside, which is devastating.
You know, that's interesting, because sometimes where we expected love, we receive pain. So some of us now are defending against love because we feel if we let ourselves risk loving, we may get more pain. And it must be terrible to think that we are running away from love.
Absolutely. Vulnerability is one of the scariest things, but we found is the most important thing for creating love relationships, for seizing new opportunities. But it's exposing yourself. And do you rather exist on the merry-go-round or the roller coaster? The merry-go-round is safe. You know what to expect. It's going to go around and around and around and around, and that can be comfortable. And yes, the chances of getting hurt are slim, but it also can be extremely boring, right? Whereas the roller coaster, yes, you might have some pretty scary, sad times, but you also have wonderful experiences. So as you've said before, yes, you might shut out the windows and so therefore shut out the pain and the rain, but you're also shutting out the beauty and the experiences.
That's so important, Marie, because many of us think that by shutting, our lives off from certain things, we shut our lives off from the bad news or the gossip or what have you. But we also shut our lives off from the hibiscus flowers, the bougainvillea, the beautiful Bahamian Sea. So in some sense, unless we're willing to come out and beyond our fear, we are doomed to live in a kind of death of codependency.
Absolutely. And I feel a lot of people don't want to express their fear because they're so scared that they're the only ones that feel it. And one of the things we found really powerful in the family groups or in groups in general is once you're able to say, I'm scared of what's going to happen, that already starts the process of healing. Once you're able to kind of look at your fear, because before, like I said, your perspective or your anticipation of what's the worst that could happen is often so much worse than even reality. Not always, but often. It's like getting a blood test. The child is so scared, and then within a second, the prick is over. So we're so scared of the worst case scenario, we call it catastrophizing, where we just think of what could possibly happen, and it seems horrible. So one of the things we'll ask in our sessions and our clients is will you die from this? Chances are you won't die, right? So let's take it back. What is the worst thing that could happen? And once someone is able to kind of look at it head on and really focus on what they're afraid of, it starts getting more manageable. Often we feel like we have all these fears, but really when you start writing them down, it's only about 2 or 3 really big ones. So sometimes we say, write a letter to your fear. Have a conversation with it. Because a lot of it's your perception of your reality versus what is actually going on.
That's so important, because many of us spend our life living at our limitations and wouldn't dream of trying to go to our potential because we're terrified of moving out of that box of our limitation.
Absolutely.
And when you think of it, we only live once, so why not blow the box apart and just go and be what you're supposed to be?
That's the ideal. And I think part of it is also, it's one thing if we don't do well staying in our comfort zone, staying in the situation that is kind of holding us back. It's another thing, the idea of breaking through, leaping out, and then what happens if you fail? Then what happens if something bad happens? then you feel even more responsible. And so that can be so terrifying. It's one thing if you're not doing well, if you're not living a happy life, but you have the excuse of, oh, it's because I'm in this bad relationship or this horrible job or I have this terrible disease or what have you. It's one thing to say that's the reason why I'm not living to my potential. But a big, deeper fear is, what if I try and at something I'm really want to do well at and fail? Or what will happen if I'm actually successful? Do I really deserve to be happy? Do I really deserve to fulfill my potential? So these are some questions that really seem to block people from leaping out. And it's important to start asking yourself them, because like you said, you only live once, and fear can really hinder your growth.
And it's interesting, someone has said that fear is just false expectations appearing real.
Yes.
And fear, like worry, is like a rocking chair. You keep on moving, but you go nowhere.
Yeah.
You just rock and stay in the same place. And so in our codependency, when we try to please people and are afraid to move out of our comfort zone, we just live in that fear zone and that worry zone.
Yeah.
And before long, we get used to it. And we can't leave it.
Absolutely. And I think, to be fair, fear is a paralyzing feeling. And often it feels limitless, like there's never going to be end. It feels like there's no end to the fear. There's no bottom. It's so all-consuming. Physically, when you're afraid, think about what happens. Your palms start sweating, your heart starts beating, you feel constricted, you might feel panicky. So physically, it's a very, very difficult feeling. Emotionally, you feel like I'm never gonna survive this. I'm gonna fail. I'm so depressed, I can't handle it. So emotionally, cognitively, the thought patterns, when you're afraid, it takes all your power away. You feel like you have no potential, you have no ability to overcome it. It feels hopeless. So fear is a very, very, very strong emotion.
And so you believe fear is at the root of why people refuse to change and move out of their comfort zone and seek to want to please people rather than do what they want to do.
Yes, I really do. I think also another strong emotion, especially for women, that seem to get in the way of breaking through codependency is anger. Anger in women is very interesting because a lot of girls were raised that it is not appropriate to show anger. Sugar and spice and everything nice, kind of repress your feelings. Codependency ties right into that because as a woman, sometimes you may feel, who am I to get angry at someone? Who am I to raise my voice? If I get angry, it's going to be considered that I am aggressive or I've got an attitude at the workplace. And they've found that women in higher positions, when they experience anger or show assertiveness, it's often misconstrued as bitchy or arrogant, whereas they've found male counterparts express the same way and they're considered strong and determined and assertive. So what happens when you're codependent, you are still feeling the feelings of anger. Anger is not right or wrong. It can be a very healthy emotion. It's kind of, Harriet Lerner said, it's like not giving yourself the right to be thirsty. If you're thirsty, you're thirsty. Even if you had a glass of water 15 minutes ago, you still have the right to be thirsty. Even if you were angry yesterday, you still have the right to be angry. And so I think a lot of times we don't feel like that's our right anymore. And so we get, it ties into our codependency because we keep pushing down that emotion.
And I guess the same reasons why people are afraid to say no.
Yeah.
If I say no to something, I may make somebody unhappy and they wouldn't like me. So rather than saying no, I say, well, let me think about it, let me put it off. But by putting it off and avoiding it, you're still saying no. Yes. Breaking the codependency cycle means my no is no, and my yes is yes. In fact, no is a full sentence, and yes is a full sentence. And it's such a relief to be able to say no, or again to say yes, if that's what you really mean.
Yes, yeah. And I think what can be very, very painful and difficult is when you know you're in a situation where you should say no, you're aware that you are being codependent or not living up to your authenticity, but you keep doing it. And so now not only are you resentful of the situation or the other person, you're starting to have a lot of resentment to yourself because you're wondering, why can't I just get out of this situation? But the fear and the repressed anger is keeping you blocked. But ironically, in a vicious cycle, that's causing you more anger and self-loathing.
That's a very excellent point, because many times the codependent person who always is pleasing someone really hates themselves.
And they're very angry.
And they're very angry and they're miserable.
Yeah.
So the question is, fellow Bahamian, can you break your codependency cycle? Do you have to still please people? Can you not say no? Can you leave your limitations and go to your potential and be the person that you were meant to be? We're going to take a break and be right back.